Hey guys, it's TG from Datasets, and today we're going to be going over pivot tables. This is part one of our pivot table session. So before we get into pivot tables, I want to talk about the concept. I want to talk about the method. And so when we say pivot, the data in itself is a pivot. So what is the definition of pivot? The pivot is a central point, pin, or shaft on which a mechanism turns or oscillates. So essentially what a pivot table is your ability to turn the data and shift around and look at it from different views. We'll get more into that later. So now look, this is the data set we have. So we have a data set of sales data, and it's comprised of sales order number, your descriptions of the product, the type of product it is, our cost of sales, and so forth. So one thing we want to take note of is that the majority of data that you use for a pivot table is in what's called relational form. And when we say relational, it means that every row is what's called a record. So here we have one sales order line, and one sales order, and it has the product, it has the type of the product, the cost of sales, the gross. It's not doubling and repeating. And the most important thing you'll see in relational data is dates. Dates are usually in one field. So right here we have ship date. Some tables you'll see that are even made from a pivot table have the dates as columns. So you would see October, November, December, but we don't want that. To use the true power of a pivot table, we need it in a relational form, which means the dates are in one column and they go down. Now don't worry, you might say, oh, well, I want everything in November to be, one date, and everything in October to be one date, so you can, what they call aggregated. Don't worry about that. So let's get into it. So what we're going to do is to create a pivot table, we're going to select all of our data, and then we're going to go up to the top. And if you don't know this already, these are called ribbons in Excel. Right now I'm using Excel, I'm using Excel 2016. So we're going to go to the insert ribbon and we're going to choose pivot table after we've selected all our data. So once you hit the pivot table button, what it's going to do is it's going to ask you, hey, are you taking it from this table, which is what we're doing? Are you using an external source, which we're not? We can talk about that later. And the most important thing is, are you creating a new worksheet or an existing? We'll talk more about how to use an existing, but for now, we're going to create a new worksheet, which means it's going to create a new tab below. So if we hit OK, you'll see that we've created a new tab. And we can rename that tab however we like. We can rename it Pivot Test. So what you'll see here is the pivot table. It's giving a name, as you can see here, Pivot Table 12. And now it's opened up a new panel on the right. So you'll see here that all of the fields that we had in our original table, as you can see across here, they're now options here. And then below we see these 4 quadrants. These 4 quadrants are how we're going to build our pivot table. So we have a filters quadrant where we can filter. We have columns where we can display across. And then we have rows and our values. Our values are going to be what's called measures. These are things you're going to measure because we're going to use different functions like adding, counting, min and max, and so forth. Okay guys, let's get at it. For this training, we're going to assume you work at this brewery that sells beer across the US. Your manager has asked you to look at the 2019 sales data and give you insight on how well the company performed. So we have the sales data, we asked our IT team, or maybe we have access directly to pull reports from your ERP system. And we have all the sales lines for 2019. And so to start, we decide, let's take the sales data and answer the 4 most common questions. What are those? They are who, what, when, and where. So let's start. So we've already told it to start creating a pivot table. We have it here. First thing you're going to do is you're going to go to your pivot table fields, and you're going to look here at all your columns. So let's say who. So to answer who, we take our customer name because that is the who. So we're going to take them and put them into our rows. Now what you can see is it's aggregated all of our customer names. They're not repeating, even though in the sales data they repeat. It says, okay, this is all of this one dimension. Now, what do we want to do? We want to measure how well. So we have to find, what do we measure? Well, the first measurement is our gross. Our gross in this scenario is our gross sales. Gross refers to the top number before you take any cost into consideration. This is our gross sales. So we're going to take that and we're going to put it in our values. You can see that it automatically does a sum. That's what we want for this, but we have other options. But let's go into our, if you go to field settings, you can see our other options. It could be our count, our average, our min, our max, and so forth. But what we want to do is we want to sum. We want to sum all the cost. Then, since I'm just a freak about data, I'm going to right click and I'm going to hit number format. And then it tells you, okay, well, how do you want to format this data? I'm going to go through and just format as currency. Since we're looking at thousands, let's not bother ourselves with cents. We're just going to hit OK. Then you can see that all for the entire 2019, all our sales. So let's say, well, who is the top? So what we can do is, since we're selected already inside this field, then you go up to the drop down and you can choose, it tells you all the customer names, but then you go to more options and you choose, I want it descending, and it says by customer name, but we don't. We want to select that, and now we have the option of saying sum of gross. So now that the sum of gross is our descending value, you can see that it's changed. And so our bottom customer and our top customer are so. So from this, we could tell our boss, okay, I can let you know who our top customers are. Our top customers is Grab and Grow Groceries. And so your boss could be like, okay, that's great. You tell me where the top customers are, but where is my market? Where are my most sales going to? Where are my least sales going to? And this is where it comes into the where question. So there's several types we have. We can take in our state. Now what we could do is we could take and look very closely here in the rows. If I take state and put it below rows, it tells me the state of all the customers. But that's not answering it. That's answering the who and where. We're saying the where and who now. So let's take the state and take it to the top. Now we get to see, based on state, how our sales are doing. So now your boss is saying, where are my sales? We can tell him by states. But let's go further. So right here, it automatically starts breaking it out. And you're like, it's too much. I just want to see it by state. Well, what you're seeing here is an indentation. If you right click on the very top, you can go to what's called expand and collapse. It lets you expand the list and collapse the list. Collapse would be to close it. You can do it by just one. Here, I've just collapsed that. Or I can right click and say, no, collapse everything. Collapse entire field. And as you see, all of the states collapsed. And only when I click into it do I get to see the details. So here, I do the same thing. I have to, unfortunately, click in, go to here, sort options, and sum of gross. Now it's going to sort my states by my gross. So now I can tell my boss, hey, most of your sales are coming from Georgia. And then you have Florida and California. But you can see real quickly, these are southeast states. So I'm doing really well in the southeast. Your boss might be like, okay, that sounds pretty good. But tell me about our products. What products are doing well? What are not doing so well? Maybe some we might say, hey, we're going to discontinue it and introduce a new product. But let's start with the what. So what we can do is we don't have to start all over. This is the power of a pivot chart. You can pivot, you can just move. So what we can do is we'll just leave gross sales there and we'll take customer and where out, and we're going to the what. So let's pull in our products, and we have our products by description. So now we have, okay, this is our list of products. We have acoustic, and it kept, no, actually it did not keep our sort. Go to more options, and then you choose sum of gross. So now we can see that, our red train, blue train are actually doing well. And our orange citrus is doing, pretty good in third, and so forth. And so your boss is like, okay, you're telling me that, hey, these are doing pretty good. But then when you get down and say this Guten Tag and Purple Haze, they're doing all right. Well, maybe your boss wants to talk into percentages. And this is where we're going to go into a new function called show values as. Very, very great tool in pivot tables. So your boss says, okay, tell me about this zest. Maybe he really likes it. What percentage of my sales is this? Well, you're like, well, I just have the numbers. I don't have percentage. So I could take this and divide by the total, or I can do it in all one action. So what you can do is you can take a measure and put it in there. And as we said, sum is just one function. Another function we have is show as percentage. So if you pull the second gross down, it'll be gross 2. If you click on it and go to value field settings, then you can go to this new tab that says show as. And then you'll have a drop down for calculation where you can say percent of column total. So what it's going to do is going to say what's the percentage of this total that this value is. And it's going to do it for all of your descriptions, all of your dimensions. So we do percentage of column total and we hit OK. Now then we also, maybe we want to change the name. So you can change the label right here and we can say percent of sales. Now you just hit OK and then there we go. Okay, let's get at it. So now the most important question, when? When are my sales? When are my customers buying? When? So let's look at this. We're gonna start with just product. When are my products selling? Maybe I'll see some seasonal trends. I don't know. So description is our part description. So again, we pull that back into our rows and we see all of our products, all of our sales. But this is for the entire year. We know that all of our data is for 2019. So let's introduce time. So our ship dates, we're gonna put those into our rows. I like to put them into our rows first, even though I'm gonna put them in columns. Why? Because I'm gonna show you a very important function when it comes to dates. It's called grouping. If we go to a date field in a pivot table and you right click and you go to group, it brings up another pop-up. This pop-up is very important. Let's look at it. It shows that our starting date is January 1st, 2019, our end date. So it lets us know beginning and end. And then it says, how do you want to group this by? The seconds, the minutes, the hours. We don't have data so granular like this, but maybe we want to look at quarters and years. Now, we only are looking at 2019, but if our boss had given us 2020 data, we could separate the years. But we're just going to pull everything right now, and then we're going to break it down. Let's go. So we're going to hit OK. And as you can see, immediately the pivot table breaks it down to the year, the quarter, the month, and even the days in the month. And if you look over here in our pivot pane, it looks as though it's creating fields for us. It's broken it down for us, and it knows that we want to group by this. So years is not important because we know it's 2019. So what we're going to do is we're just going to drag it over and let it go. By doing that, it takes it out. You can see, okay, now we're just looking at quarters and months. So let's get into it. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this and extend it over and say quarters. Then I'm going to put months. And you know what? I'm not looking at the exact ship date. So let's take that out. Let's look how we did. So you can close your pivot pane by pressing X here. And I'll show you, if you want it back, you go to the Analyze tab and you choose Field List. And it comes right back. But let's get into it. So as we look, we get to see, oh, okay, here's our quarter total. Our quarter total was 22,000, and you see it's broken out here by months. So if we were to say, okay, I want to just see the quarter, don't show me the months. You can take the months out. And then here we go. Our top, it's still descending by the gross sales. But you can see Red Train did well. Actually, Red Train performed well in every month. But even Blue Train took the lead in quarter 3. And in Q4. Wow. So it seems as though Red Train was more consistent. Even though it wasn't the top winner, it was more consistent throughout the year. Where Blue Train wasn't so popular in the first quarter. So then you're saying, okay, your boss says, well, why is that? I have different types of products. different types of beers. Maybe some of them, maybe that is based on the type. At which point we can go into our type, our product type, even though I name it so, and we can put that over the description. And now we get to see our ales, how our ales are performing. Our ales are performing pretty steady. And so you get to see how they perform by their type. Again, let's right click and collapse entire field, and we get to see, okay, our ales doing pretty steady. IPAs seem like they're kind of all over the place. 33,000 to 28 to 37 to 25. They're kind of all over the place. Seems like they go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. Microbrews are pretty consistent, and our stouts, same as the IPAs, really. And so what you're able to do with this is you're able to give a time sensitivity. And you can also still go back to your microbrews and break them out, but it still gives you the ability to say, wow, over time, how are things doing? And again, you can still take quarters out. And so once you've done the grouping that we did earlier, look here, you'll notice that it keeps it. Even though we took it out, it keeps it. So I can still take months and throw it right back out there. And here we go. I have every type over month, and then I can break them down into products. Or I could even say, your boss says, okay, what's our top 2 products? And our top 2 products were, if we remember, Red Train and Blue Train. So then you can even take that and say, okay, how are they doing over quarters? And by taking this at the header level and putting quarter beneath it, you're able to take Red Train and say quarter-wise. Well, I don't want to do it this way. I want to do it this way. I'm going to take months out. So Red Train, how did Red Train do in quarters? And we looked at this earlier. So it's just another way, like I said, we're just pivoting and pivoting and pivoting and pivoting. You could even go back to your customer and say, okay, our top customers, right? Take them out and look at the total sales, right? Let's just make sure that it's sorting by its gross. So it's sorting our top customers, right? And our top customers, Grab and Go Grocery. And what are they buying? Train, Red Train. So you're able to just pivot and really dive into the information and look at it. And be like, wow. And remember that function we talked about earlier? I'm looking at my top customer and I want to say, well, what are they buying? They're buying 39,000, but what products are they buying? And I can grab my gross, I can bring it down. I can go and I can tell it to show percentage, values as percentage of column total. And boom. So you're seeing the percentage. If you hold this entire percentage, you can see the sum is 5.86%, which matches this total here. So you get to see this breakdown of what customers are buying. Actually, sorry, I should filter this by Grab and Go. Grab and Go, then it's 100%. So majority, 30% of what they buy is Blue Train, Red Train. And then I could say, okay, types. These are the percentages. It seems like they're buying microbrews. So guys, I just wanted to spend time to show you that there's many things you can do with a pivot table and just in its table form to pivot and look at, hey, how is this, how's that? We didn't even look at the concept of where your boss can say, what is customer type? So let's end with that. Customer type, we have 2 types of customers. We have grocery stores and liquor stores. It seems like we're selling a lot more to grocery stores. Again, we have sum of gross and its percentage. 70% is going to grocery stores. Makes sense. Liquor stores are probably selling more liquor. And you could say, okay, well, where is that occurring? Then again, you can go into the states and say, okay, state-wise. Let's look at Georgia, one of our highest percentage. Georgia is 10% grocery stores and 5% liquor stores. It's good way to see, okay, what penetration do I have in the market? How well are we doing? But guys, that's gonna wrap it up for part one. I hope I gave you some things to be excited about. Data is very exciting. Remember that turning data into information is our goal here. This, at the end of the day, this is just data. These are just numbers. This is just something coming out of the system. But for us to look at it and say, hey, how is Georgia broken down? How are our sales? Where are they? What products are doing well? This is data turning into information. And that's what's going to really help you in your job as far as reporting. So thanks guys for participating in part one, and I'll see you guys in part two. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We want to keep these videos coming out. So thanks guys.